Would you trade your freedom for convenience? Because that's what I did. And I regret it every single day. At 82, I've made a lot of choices, some good, some bad. But there's one decision I wish I could take back, moving into a nursing home. I thought I was making the right choice. My family thought so too. They told me I'd have everything I needed, care, safety, comfort. It sounded like a good idea. But what I didn't realize was, I wasn't just changing where I lived, I was giving up my life as I knew it. I walked in, thinking I'd be taken care of. But I walked out. Well, I never really walked out. Most people think they know what life in a nursing home is like, but they don't. Not until it's too late. You believe you'll still have control over your days. You assume family will visit often, that life will continue just in a different setting. But that's not how it works, and I learned that the hard way. Before I go on, let me ask you something. Have you or a loved one ever considered a nursing home? If so, comment yes below. Because once you go in, leaving isn't as easy as you think. Now, let me tell you 6 hard truths I wish someone had told me before I made this choice. And we'll start with the one that hit me the hardest. The moment you realize you've been forgotten. Truth number 1, feeling forgotten. At first, everything seemed fine. My family visited often. My daughter came once a week. My grandkids stopped by on weekends. For a little while, I still felt connected to my old life. But then, life got busy. The visits became less frequent. First, my daughter started calling instead of coming. Then, the grandkids had school, work, their own lives to manage. And before I knew it, I was sitting alone. Holidays were the hardest. Everyone promised they'd come. But somehow, plans always changed at the last minute. I'd sit in the common room watching the door, hoping today would be the day someone remembered me. I wasn't the only one. I saw it in the eyes of the other residents, the way they watched the clock, the way they turned toward the sound of footsteps, only to see a nurse passing by. It's not that our families stop loving us, it's just that when you're not around every day, people assume you're fine. They think you're adjusting. They tell themselves you don't need as much attention anymore, but the truth is, the longer you're in a nursing home, the easier it is for people to forget how much you still need them. I remember one evening, sitting in my room, holding my phone. I wanted to call my son, just to hear his voice, just to remind him I was still here. But I didn't want to be a burden, so I put the phone down. And that's when it hit me. This was my life now, waiting, watching, hoping someone would remember. Have you ever felt forgotten, even by the people you love? If so, comment "I understand" below. Because loneliness doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in, little by little, until one day you realize you're alone. And that wasn't the only thing I lost. The next thing, my independence. Truth number 2, losing my independence. Back home, I had control over my life. I decided when to wake up, when to eat, when to go outside. If I wanted to take a walk, I took a walk. If I wanted to stay up late reading, I did. But the moment I moved into a nursing home, everything changed. I lost control. Everything ran on a schedule. Breakfast at a set time, whether I was hungry or not. Lights out at a certain hour, whether I was ready for bed or not. Want to go outside? You need permission. And you might have to wait until someone is available to help. At first I thought, I'll get used to it. But then, the little things started adding up. One morning, I woke up craving a hot cup of coffee. I reached for my robe, ready to start my day the way I always had. But when I looked around, I realized this wasn't my home. No coffee pot in the kitchen, no familiar chair by the window, no freedom to start my morning the way I wanted. I had to wait for breakfast to be served, wait for my turn in the shower, wait for permission to do things I once did without a second thought. And the worst part? You start adapting. You stop asking when they tell you what's for dinner. You stop arguing when they say it's time for bed. You learn to fit into their system. But in the process, you start losing yourself. losing the small freedoms that made life yours, and once they're gone, you miss them more than you ever thought possible. What's one small freedom you would never want to give up? Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because once you give up control, getting it back isn't as easy as you think. And that's not the only thing that changed. The next thing I lost? My sense of purpose. Truth number 3, losing my sense of purpose. At first, I thought I was just changing where I lived. I didn't realize I was also losing why I lived. Back home, I had routines, I had responsibilities, even the small things, watering the plants, making my own coffee, tidying up my space, gave me a sense of purpose. But in the nursing home, those daily rituals disappeared. Meals were made for me. Cleaning was done by someone else. The plants, they weren't mine to take care of anymore. At first, I told myself it was nice. No more chores, no more responsibilities, just rest. But after a few weeks, something felt off. The days felt long, stretched out, empty. I wasn't the only one who felt it. There was a man named George, 84 years old, a carpenter his entire life. At home, he was always fixing things, building little projects in his garage. But here, there were no tools, no projects, nothing for him to create. I watched as he slowly withdrew. His hands, once strong and skilled, now rested idle in his lap. "I feel useless," he told me one day. And I knew exactly what he meant. Because when you no longer have something to care for, when you no longer have something to work toward, life starts to lose its meaning. The mind slows down, the body follows, and soon you start to feel like just another resident in a place where time moves, but nothing really changes. What's one thing that gives your life meaning every day? Comment below. I'd love to know. Because once you lose your purpose, it's hard to find it again. And once that happens, your health begins to fade too. Which leads me to the next truth, how quickly my body started to decline. Truth number 4, my body started to decline faster than I ever expected. Before I moved into a nursing home, I was doing pretty well for my age. I wasn't running marathons, but I could take care of myself. I could go for walks. I could cook my own meals. I had my little habits that kept me moving, stretching in the mornings, walking to the mailbox, standing while I made coffee. But once I moved in, everything changed. At first, I thought I was just taking it easy. Meals were brought to me. I no longer had to stand in the kitchen to cook. If I needed something, I could just push a button and someone would come help. It felt like a luxury until I realized what was happening. The less I did for myself, the weaker I became. I stopped moving as much. My legs felt stiffer. I sat more than I used to. And before I knew it, getting up from a chair started feeling like a chore. The muscles I had spent years maintaining were disappearing faster than I ever expected. And it wasn't just me. I saw it happen to others too. People who walked in on their own 2 feet were suddenly relying on wheelchairs. People who had once been independent now needed help with things they never struggled with before. The more help we were given, the more we seemed to need it. I remember my neighbor, Alice. She was 81 years old when she moved in. She was lively, determined. She told everyone, "Just because I'm here doesn't mean I'm slowing down." She took daily walks around the facility. She insisted she would keep herself strong. But after a few months, I noticed something. She wasn't walking as much. Then she started using a walker, then a wheelchair. One day she looked at me and said, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." And that's exactly what it felt like. Because when you stop using your body, you start losing it. And in a nursing home, where everything is designed to make life easier, it's easy to forget that movement isn't just about convenience, it's about survival. If I had known how quickly I would lose my strength, I would have fought harder to keep moving. I would have pushed myself to stay active, to take those extra steps, to stand up even when I didn't feel like it, because once you slow down, getting back up isn't as easy as you think. Do you believe that staying active keeps us young? If so, comment, keep moving below. And as hard as that was, it wasn't the only thing I lost. The next thing, my privacy and my dignity. Truth number 5, losing my privacy and dignity. I never thought much about privacy. At home, I had my own space, my own bedroom, my own bathroom. If I wanted to sit alone in silence, I could. If I wanted to close my door and shut out the world, I could. But in a nursing home, privacy is a luxury you don't always get to keep. From the moment I arrived, I felt like I was constantly being watched. Staff coming in and out, scheduled room checks, shared spaces where you're rarely alone. Even simple things like getting dressed or using the bathroom often required someone's assistance. I know they were just doing their job, but it's not easy to accept help for things you've done independently your entire life. I remember my first week there. I was about to take a shower when a nurse knocked on my door and stepped in before I could even answer. She smiled and said, "Just checking in?" I nodded, but inside, I felt something shift. I wasn't in control anymore. Want to take a shower? You might have to wait until someone is available to help. Need to use the restroom? Sometimes pressing the call button means waiting longer than you'd like. Even meal choices were limited. If you don't like what's on the menu that day, well, too bad. And then there was the issue of roommates. Not everyone gets a private room. You could end up sharing a space with someone you didn't choose, someone who snores, someone who talks all night, someone whose habits don't match yours. I was lucky. My roommate was kind, but I heard stories from others who weren't so fortunate. Some had roommates who were loud, some had roommates who were unclean, some had roommates with cognitive issues that made sleeping nearly impossible. And no matter how much you try to make your room feel like home, it's never truly yours. Dignity is a hard thing to lose, and I didn't realize how much of mine I'd have to surrender until I was already there. When people knock but don't always wait for an answer before coming in, when you're spoken to like a patient instead of a person, when your daily routines are dictated by a schedule you didn't create, it changes you. You start feeling less like yourself and more like just another name on a list. Do you think privacy is a basic right, no matter your age? If so, comment privacy below. And if you think all of this is difficult to handle, there's one more thing that's even harder. Leaving isn't as easy as you think. Truth number 6, leaving isn't as easy as you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was temporary. I thought I'd give it a try, see how things went. And if I didn't like it, I could always leave. That's what I believed. But what I didn't realize was just how hard it would be to get out once I was in. At first, it seemed simple. If I didn't like it, I'd just go back home. But home wasn't the same anymore. My house sat empty. Maintaining it from a distance became difficult. And my children? They had already started making changes, selling things they thought I wouldn't need, rearranging furniture, even considering renting out the place. So when I told them I wanted to leave, they hesitated. Are you sure you can manage on your own? Wouldn't it be safer to stay? We just want what's best for you. I heard the concern in their voices, but I also heard something else. Doubt. Doubt that I could still take care of myself. Doubt that I could return to the life I once had. And honestly, I wasn't sure anymore either, because the truth is, after months of living in a place where I didn't have to cook, clean, or even walk very far, I wasn't as strong as I used to be. The independence I once had started slipping away, and that fear, the fear of not being able to manage on my own, that's what kept me stuck. I met others who had the same experience. They thought they'd try the nursing home for a little while, only to realize that leaving wasn't as easy as they thought. And for some, it became impossible. Once their home was sold, once their savings were drained by the cost of care, there was no going back. That's the part nobody tells you. Moving in feels like a decision you can reverse. But for most people, it isn't. The nursing home slowly becomes your whole world. And before you know it, the life you once knew starts feeling like a distant memory. Did this surprise you? If so, comment "didn't know" below. Now that you've heard my story, let me leave you with one final thought. Looking back, I don't regret growing older, but I do regret believing that a nursing home was my only option. I walked in expecting comfort, safety, and a better quality of life. What I found instead was a world that slowly took away my independence, my privacy, my purpose, and even my sense of self. Does that mean nursing homes are all bad? Some people genuinely need the level of care they provide. Some people have no other choice. But if you still have a choice, think carefully about what you're giving up. Because once you move in, life will never be the same. If I could do it over, I would have fought harder to stay in my own home. I would have explored more ways to get help without giving up my freedom. I would have made sure I truly needed to be there before making such a permanent move. And if you're facing this decision right now, I hope you take the time to ask yourself, is this truly what's best for me? Or is it just what seems easiest right now? Because the life you have today, your routines, your independence, your choices, is worth holding on to for as long as you can. What's one thing you learned from this video? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your story matters. Reading your comments gives us motivation to keep creating content that helps and inspires. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.